The human medic had been working in the outer zones for years, traveling to areas most people avoided. The rocky wastelands were dangerous, not just because of the harsh terrain or sudden storms, but because rumors always traveled faster than facts. Tales of creatures that could tear through steel and swallow anyone whole were whispered among colonists, and many said these lands were cursed. But for the medic, the dangers were part of the work. Every assignment was a chance to save life where others had given up. This day was no different, except the scans coming from the northern ridge had been unusual. The readings showed a faint, irregular heat signature, unlike anything the medics had encountered before. It was slow, weak, and scattered, as if whatever was there was barely holding on to life. Most people would have stayed away, warned by stories of an old predator that roamed these rocks. But the medic's curiosity and compassion would not allow it. They were trained to move carefully, to observe first, and only engage when it was safe or when ignoring it could cost a life. The wasteland stretched endlessly. Jagged cliffs and sharp boulders that reflected the sun's glare like shards of broken glass. The wind cut across the ridges in harsh, chilling waves, carrying dust and sand that made breathing difficult. Even though the medic was fully equipped with protective gear, their eyes constantly scanned the area, looking for movement. Every instinct told them to stay alert. Then, behind a collapsed ridge, they noticed something. It was subtle at first, a small puff of dust rising, almost like the last breath of a dying flame. The medic stopped and crouched behind a rock, scanning the area carefully. And then they saw it. The massive body of a dragon-like creature lay among the rocks. Its scales were cracked and faded, and blood stained the jagged stones around it. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. Every inch of it seemed to whisper that it was near the end, old and worn from battles long past. Most people would have fled at the sight of such a creature. Stories of its kind painted them as ruthless hunters, capable of destroying everything in sight with claws and fire. But the medic saw something different. The creature was not striking out or growling. Its eyes, half closed, showed exhaustion rather than rage. There was no threat in its posture, only surrender. The medic moved slowly, making sure every step was measured and visible. A sudden movement could trigger aggression, even from a creature that was weak. But as they got closer, they could see details that made their heart tighten. Wounds riddled its massive frame-deep gashes from claws, broken scales, and a long, jagged cut along its side that had begun to fester. Blood had dried around it, but the faint smell of infection was strong. The creature shivered slightly with every shallow breath. It was clear it had given up. It had accepted that death was coming and that nothing could stop it. Many people might have thought the creature had no chance of survival and left it to the elements, but the medic could not do that. Life, even in a being so different, was worth fighting for. As the medic kneeled a few meters away, they spoke softly, not expecting the creature to understand, but knowing that sound could calm it. "I'm here to help. I won't hurt you," they whispered. Their voice was steady, gentle, and deliberate. Every word was meant to show the creature that it was not alone, that someone cared. For a long moment, nothing happened. The wasteland was silent, except for the wind and the faint rasp of the dragon's breathing. Then its head twitched slightly, and its glowing eyes opened, focusing on the human. The gaze was sharp, curious, and cautious. It seemed to be measuring whether this human was friend or threat. The medic remained still, meeting its gaze without blinking, radiating patience and calm. It was unusual for these creatures to allow anyone close, especially a human. In all the reports, they attacked first and judged later. But this one, old and broken, did not have the strength for fear or aggression. Its body seemed almost too tired to move, yet there was a faint spark of life, a silent plea that it somehow wanted to survive. Even if it didn't know how, the medic examined it carefully from a distance, noting the patterns of its wounds. Infection was spreading along its side, and dehydration had left its skin dry and brittle. Muscles were strained from fighting pain and exhaustion. Every step, every movement it had made to survive so far, had left a mark. And yet, despite all this, the creature had endured. It had survived long after most would have perished. Slowly, the medic pulled out a small device from their pack, a portable scanner used to check vital signs in dangerous creatures. Carefully, they aimed it at the dragon. The readings were weak. Its heart was beating irregularly, its body temperature lower than normal, and oxygen levels dangerously low. It was fragile, closer to death than life, yet still alive. For the medic, this was a moment of decision. Protocol dictated that dangerous creatures like this should be reported and contained, sometimes by force. But the medic knew that this being had no chance if left alone. They decided then to help it, even if it was risky, even if others called them reckless, even if their own life could be in danger. They could not abandon this creature. They moved slightly closer, showing their hands empty. Every step was careful, deliberate, meant to signal that they meant no harm. The dragon watched, blinking slowly, and for the first time in what might have been years, it seemed to consider another outcome besides death. Its large, scaled head lowered slightly, and its breathing grew a little steadier, as if acknowledging that the human was not an enemy. Hours could have passed in those first few moments. The wasteland remained harsh and unforgiving, yet a fragile connection had formed. The medic stayed nearby, speaking softly, explaining each small movement they intended to make. They touched a wing lightly, just enough to check for fractures, and the dragon flinched and relaxed. There was trust building, tiny and uncertain, but real by the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. The medic had learned one crucial thing. Even creatures that had given up on life could feel care, could respond to patience and compassion. This dragon, old and injured, had accepted death. Yet now it faced a choice it had not expected a chance to survive, offered by a human who refused to turn away. And in that quiet, rugged wasteland, with the wind cutting like knives and the rocks cold underfoot, a bond began to form between human and dragon, between healer and dying predator. It was a bond not built on words or shared history, but on the simple, undeniable act of choosing life over death, care over fear, and hope over surrender. The medic knew this was only the beginning. They would have to fight, persuade, and carefully guide this ancient creature through the next stages of survival. But in that moment, all that mattered was that the dragon was still alive, still breathing, and for the first time in a long time, not alone. The dragon lay quietly among the rocks, its massive body stretched across the jagged terrain. Every breath was a struggle, each inhale sharp and uneven. It seemed to have accepted that its life was coming to an end. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as though it were conserving the last of its strength. For years it had survived battles, storms, and hunger, but now injuries and age had taken their toll. There was nothing left for it to fight. It expected death. Nothing more. The human medic stayed a safe distance at first, watching carefully. The wind howled across the wasteland, carrying dust and small pebbles that clattered against the dragon's scales. The creature flinched at times, not from fear of the medic, but from pain and exhaustion. Its eyes, though tired, held a sharp intelligence, an awareness that seemed to measure the world one last time. It had lived a long life, and it knew when the end was near. But the medic noticed something else, something surprising. Though the dragon had accepted death, it did not resist the human presence. Most creatures, especially predators of this size and strength, would lash out instinctively when injured. They would attack anyone who came close. But this dragon remained still, as if silently observing the human, unsure of what to make of them. It did not move aggressively. It did not roar. It only watched. The medic moved slowly, speaking softly to the creature. "I am here to help you," they said, their voice calm and steady. "I won't hurt you. I only want to help." The dragon's eyes flicked toward them, blinking slowly. There was a strange hesitation in its gaze, a mixture of confusion and cautious curiosity. Perhaps it did not understand the words, but it could sense the tone. It could sense the intention that the wounds on the dragon were severe. Deep cuts ran along its flanks, some jagged and raw, others darkened with infection. One of its wings was bent awkwardly, probably broken in a previous fight, making any attempt to fly impossible. Its tail, long and powerful, twitched occasionally, but not in defense, more like a muscle spasming from pain. The dragon's body was weak, its once vibrant scales dull and cracked. It had fought hard to survive, but now survival seemed impossible. Despite this, the medic saw a glimmer of life. The dragon's breathing, though shallow, was steady. Its heart, though faint, was beating. There was a possibility, a small, fragile chance that it could be saved. And that possibility was enough. Carefully, the medic retrieved a small kit from their pack. It was not much, just enough supplies for field stabilization, bandages, antiseptic gel, hydration tubes, and a scanner to check vital signs. Every movement was deliberate, meant to avoid startling the dragon. They did not rush. Patience was crucial. One wrong move could trigger a defensive response, and at this size, even a swipe could be deadly. The scanner revealed what the medic had already suspected. The dragon's body temperature was lower than normal, a sign of shock. Its heart rate was weak and irregular. Its oxygen levels were barely sufficient to keep it conscious. And yet, it was alive. The medic knelt a few feet away, carefully assessing each wound. Planning their next step, the dragon's head turned slightly, watching the medic. Its eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with the quiet knowledge that it had lived a long, harsh life. It had known many battles, many losses, and yet it had endured. Now, facing what it believed was inevitable, it seemed to recognize something unfamiliar in the human, a willingness to help without fear or expectation. Hours passed as the medic worked slowly, cleaning dirt and debris from the dragon's deepest wounds. They used antiseptic gel to prevent infection from spreading further and carefully applied bandages to control bleeding. Every movement was deliberate and gentle, meant to ease the creature's pain rather than cause it. The dragon flinched at first, unsure of what was happening, but did not resist. It allowed the human to work, as if acknowledging that this care was not a threat. The medic spoke softly throughout, explaining every action in a calm voice. "This will hurt for a moment, but it's necessary," they said. "I won't let you suffer alone." Though the dragon could not understand words fully, it seemed to recognize the tone. Slowly it relaxed, lowering its massive head and shifting just enough to allow access to its side. Night began to fall over the wasteland, the air cooling and wind gusting stronger. The dragon's breathing grew more labored, and the medic wrapped a thermal blanket around its body to help maintain heat. The creature's muscles twitched occasionally, but there was no attempt to escape. It seemed to understand that it was being cared for, and for the first time in what might have been years, it did not have to fight for its survival alone, not in those quiet hours. A fragile trust began to form between the human and the dragon. There were no words exchanged, only gestures and movements. The dragon allowed the medic to approach, to touch, to treat its wounds. The medic, in turn, treated the creature not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a living being deserving of care. The medic also realized that this creature had a story. Its scars, its wounds, the way it moved, all of these spoke of countless battles, of survival against impossible odds. It had been a predator, feared by many, yet here it was, vulnerable and dependent. There was something humbling in witnessing such strength humbled by age and injury, and something inspiring in seeing life cling on despite everything dot by dawn. The dragon had not moved much, but it had not grown weaker either. Its eyes followed the medic, now with a hint of recognition. Perhaps it did not fully understand why a human would help it, but it felt the intention. That was enough. The first step toward survival had been taken. The medic stayed with it through the night, taking turns resting nearby while keeping a careful watch. Any sudden movement could startle the creature, and its injuries required constant attention. But through patience and quiet vigilance, a connection deepened. A connection that said without words, "You are not alone. I will not abandon you." And so, the dragon, though old and mortally wounded, faced a choice it had never expected. It could remain in its resignation, allowing the wasteland to claim it as it had claimed so many others. Or it could allow this human to help, to fight for it when it no longer had the strength to fight for itself. For the first time in a long time, the creature's eyes held something beyond acceptance. They held a faint, fragile spark of hope out. The medic understood that this was only the beginning. The real challenge would come in the next hours and days, as they worked to stabilize the dragon, treat its wounds fully, and help it regain enough strength to survive. But in this moment, there was a fragile peace. The dragon had not attacked, it had not resisted, and it had not given up entirely. Life, for now, had a chance to continue in the quiet wasteland. Under the dim glow of the rising sun, a bond had formed. It was a bond not built on language or shared history, but on care, compassion, and the simple human choice to save a life. And for the medic, it was a reminder of why they had chosen this path, because sometimes saving a life required courage, patience, and the willingness to believe that even the most unlikely creature deserved a chance. The medic knew the moment had come to make a decision. The dragon was old, wounded, and weak, but still alive. Every breath it took was a fragile victory over death. Yet there was no guarantee that it would survive the night or even the next hour. The medic had two choices: follow protocol and call in military backup, which often meant sedation or containment that could end the creature's life, or take a risk and try to help it themselves. Most of the medic's colleagues would have chosen the first option. They were trained to prioritize safety, especially when dealing with a predator as large and dangerous as this dragon. Reports of the species' aggression were well known. Even when injured, these creatures could defend themselves with terrifying strength. A single swipe from its claw could crush metal, and its tail could knock over a person easily. The stories of entire rescue teams being injured or worse were warnings that everyone took seriously. But the medic saw more than just a predator. They saw a living being, fragile and in pain, trying to survive despite overwhelming odds. Its eyes, though tired, still held intelligence, still held life. To turn away now, to leave it to die because it was dangerous, felt wrong. It was not just about courage or defiance of rules. It was about compassion. And for the medic, compassion had always been stronger than fear. Carefully, the medic radioed the field command. "I've found the creature. It's alive but critically wounded," they said calmly. "I need supplies, not weapons. No sedatives unless necessary for emergency stabilization." A voice on the other end hesitated. "Are you sure? That thing could kill anyone near it." "Protocol. I'm sure," the medic interrupted gently but firmly. "If I follow the usual protocol, it won't survive. I can't let that happen. Please send medical supplies only." The line went silent for a moment, and then permission was grudgingly granted. Supplies would arrive in a few hours, but until then, the medic had to act carefully. Every movement, every choice was critical. They could not afford a mistake. The dragon shifted slightly, its eyes following every movement. Its breathing was slow but steady, a little more relaxed than before. It seemed to sense the human's intentions, even if it didn't fully understand them. The medic had learned that when dealing with intelligent creatures, calm and patience were as important as medical skill. Sudden motions could provoke fear. Fear could provoke aggression. The medic began by assessing the most urgent wounds. The jagged gash along its side was infected, and if left untreated, it could spread to vital organs. There were deep punctures from previous battles, some of which had started to necrotize. The broken wing was twisted in a way that suggested a fracture near the joint. Every movement of the dragon caused pain, but the medic moved slowly, gently examining each injury without rushing. "Easy," the medic whispered, kneeling beside the dragon. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need to check your injuries." The dragon's large head lowered slightly, and for a moment it seemed to consider the human's words. Its eyes flicked to the scanner the medic had used before. Though it didn't understand the device, it sensed that the human was trying to help, not harm. The dragon's tail twitched slightly, not in defense, but as if adjusting its body to allow better access. Using the supplies from their pack, the medic carefully cleaned the infected areas with antiseptic gel. Each touch was cautious, meant to reduce pain rather than cause more. The dragon flinched at first, but then seemed to relax as the medic continued. They wrapped bandages around the worst wounds, securing them without restricting blood flow or causing discomfort. Hydration was the next step. The dragon was severely dehydrated, its body weak from lack of fluids. The medic set up a slow drip using an improvised tube and carefully inserted it into a safe area where it would be absorbed. The dragon flinched, then stayed still. Perhaps it understood that this strange, careful human was helping it survive. Hours passed in this slow, careful routine. The wind whipped across the rocky wasteland, dust and pebbles hitting both medic and dragon, but neither moved unnecessarily. The medic spoke softly throughout, not to explain every procedure, but to provide reassurance. "You're doing well," they murmured. "I know it hurts. Just hold on. You're stronger than you think." The dragon's breathing began to stabilize. Its chest rose and fell more evenly, and though its body was still weak, there was a visible change. It had accepted help, and it had not fought against it. There was a silent understanding growing between human and predator, a fragile trust built not on words, but on actions. Then came the moment of the most difficult decision. The medic knew that to fully stabilize the dragon, it would need to be moved to a safer environment. The rocky wasteland was not suitable for extended treatment, and the creature could not survive another night exposed to the elements. But moving it was dangerous. The dragon was enormous, and any sudden movement could cause it to panic. It could lash out and cause serious injury to the medic, or worsen its own injuries. The medic studied the dragon carefully, reading its body language. Its eyes flicked between them and the horizon, its tail twitching in slight agitation. It was old, tired, and in pain, but it was also aware of what was happening. The medic knew that the dragon was capable of understanding enough to cooperate if approached correctly. Slowly, they began the process of getting the dragon ready for transport. They spoke gently, reassuring the creature at every step. "We're going to move you," the medic said. "I know it's scary, but I will not let anything happen to you. Just follow my movements. I'll be right here." The dragon shifted its massive body, testing the medic's reaction. There was a flicker of doubt in its eyes, a hesitation born from centuries of survival instincts. But the medic stayed calm, showing no fear. They placed hands carefully on the dragon, not to restrain it harshly, but to guide it, to provide support. Slowly, gradually, they managed to get the creature to stand, or at least to a crouched, supported position. The process took hours. Each step was measured, each touch deliberate. The dragon's body trembled, not from aggression, but from pain and exhaustion. Yet it did not fight. It did not lash out. It allowed the medic to guide it. And in that allowance, a bond deepened a silent agreement that the human's care was genuine. As the sun began to rise, painting the wasteland in soft shades of gold and pink, the medic looked at the dragon and felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had managed to stabilize it, to gain its trust, and to prepare it for transport. But the real challenge was still ahead. The creature was old, fragile, and still very much at risk. Moving it to a secure medical habitat would require courage, skill, and continued patience. For the first time, the dragon seemed to understand that survival was possible. Its eyes, though weary, followed the medic with a quiet acknowledgement, as if silently agreeing to take this next step. It had been ready to die, but now, faced with compassion and care, it had chosen, in its own way, to accept help. The medic knew that saving this creature would not be easy. There would be risks, and there would be moments of doubt. But in that moment, with the first rays of sunlight warming the rocky wasteland, there was hope. Hope that life, even in the most unlikely form, could be preserved. Hope that trust could exist between species that had long been enemies. Hope that courage and compassion could triumph over fear. And so, the medic prepared for the next stage of this fragile, extraordinary journey. They would move the dragon from the wasteland, treat it properly, and fight for its survival. Every careful action, every gentle word, every small movement mattered. Because in the end, it was not just about saving a creature, it was about proving that life, in any form, was worth the risk. The dragon, old and mortally wounded, had accepted death. But now, guided by the steady hands of a human who refused to give up, it had a chance to fight once more. And for the medic, that chance was everything. The medic had managed to stabilize the dragon enough to prevent its life from slipping away entirely. But they knew the real challenge was just beginning. The dragon was still old, wounded, and weak. Its body carried the marks of countless battles, and its spirit had grown weary over decades of survival. To help it truly recover, they would need more than supplies. They would need patience, understanding, and a bond of trust that crossed the barrier between human and predator. The first few hours of treatment had been tense. The dragon's sharp instincts, honed over centuries of fighting and surviving, were still present. It flinched at every sudden movement, every unfamiliar sound. But gradually, the creature began to recognize that the medic meant no harm. It was a small recognition, almost imperceptible, at first a twitch of its massive head, a slight shift in posture, a slower, calmer breathing. These small signals gave the medic hope, and they worked even more carefully, speaking softly at every step. "You're doing well," the medic whispered. "I know it hurts. I know you're tired. But we can get through this together." The dragon blinked slowly, watching the human's movements with sharp, intelligent eyes. It had lived for a long time in a world where creatures either attacked or fled. But this human acted differently. Every touch was deliberate, gentle, careful. Every word was meant to calm rather than threaten. For the first time in years, the dragon did not feel the need to defend itself. It allowed the medic to examine its wounds more closely, to touch areas that would have caused pain, and yet now caused only cautious acceptance. The dragon's injuries were severe. Deep cuts ran along its flanks, some from territorial battles, others from predators or traps left in the wasteland. The broken wing was twisted, unable to function properly, and the muscles surrounding it were stiff and bruised. Its tail twitched occasionally, a reflexive response to discomfort rather than aggression. And infection was already setting in, darkening some of the larger wounds. Every movement of the dragon caused pain, yet it remained still under the medic's hands. It had long since accepted suffering as part of its existence. But the medic's presence offered a new choice, relief, however temporary, and a chance at survival. Carefully, the medic applied antiseptic to the wounds, working slowly so as not to cause further pain. They wrapped bandages securely, yet gently, making sure circulation remained intact. The dragon flinched at the first touch, but as the medic continued, it relaxed, allowing the treatment to continue. Every careful gesture was a lesson in trust. Every soft word was a reminder that life could still matter, even for a creature so near its perceived end. The night grew colder, the wind sharper. Dust and sand stung the dragon's scales, and the medic used thermal blankets to protect it from the elements. The dragon's large body trembled with exhaustion, but it no longer struggled. It leaned slightly into the medic's presence, not out of dependence, but perhaps a simple acknowledgement that the human would not abandon it. Throughout the long night, the medic remained by the dragon's side. They checked its vital signs regularly, administered fluids, and gently soothed its pain. Every small task required careful planning and patience. The dragon's reactions were subtle: a shift of the tail, a flick of the ear, a soft blink, but the medic paid attention to every detail. At one point, the dragon raised its massive head and let out a low, rumbling sound. It was not a roar or a threat, but almost a sigh, a sound of acknowledgement. The medic responded in kind, speaking softly. "I know it's hard. I know you're tired. But I won't let you face this alone." The dragon's eyes followed the medic as they moved around it, checking wounds and preparing supplies for the next stage of care. There was a strange intelligence in its gaze, an awareness that this human was different from any other being it had encountered. Most life forms in the wastelands were competitors, predators, or threats. But here was someone who offered help without expectation, without threat, without demand. By dawn, a small transformation had begun. The dragon's breathing was steadier, its eyes sharper, and its body, though still weak, had relaxed in the human's presence. It had begun to trust, not fully, not yet, but enough to allow the medic to work without constant vigilance. This trust, fragile and tentative, was the foundation for what would come next: true recovery. The medic knew that trust alone would not heal the dragon. Physical treatment was only part of the process. Mental and emotional care were just as important, especially for a creature so intelligent and aware. They spoke gently, not just to explain what they were doing, but to comfort, to reassure, to show that life could still be valued. "You've survived so much," the medic said softly. "You've lived longer than most could, and now you have a chance to see another day. You can rest, you can heal, and you don't have to do it alone." The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, almost as if considering the words. Its tail twitched less frequently, its ears relaxed, and its eyes remained steady on the medic. There was no language between them, no shared history, but in that moment, communication was not necessary. Actions, gestures, and presence spoke louder than words. The medic worked for hours, attending to each wound, checking for signs of infection, adjusting bandages, and administering fluids. They moved carefully, knowing that even a small mistake could cause pain or provoke a defensive reaction. The dragon responded with patience, flinching at first, but gradually remaining still, trusting the human's hands. By midday, the wind had calmed, and the sun warmed the rocky wasteland. The dragon's breathing was more even, its body less tense. It had begun to shift slightly, testing its strength and balance. The medic observed closely, offering support and reassurance with every movement. The creature had not fully recovered, but it was no longer at the brink of death. Life had taken hold again, fragile but real. Over the next few hours, the bond between human and dragon deepened. The dragon allowed the medic to touch its side, clean wounds, and apply treatments without resistance. It even shifted slightly closer at times, seeking the human's presence. This was extraordinary. Creatures of its kind rarely allowed anyone, human or otherwise, near them in such a vulnerable state. Yet here it was, responding to care, to patience, to genuine compassion. The medic understood that this bond was fragile. Any sudden movement, any sign of aggression or fear could break it. They moved deliberately, speaking softly, maintaining calm and reassurance. Every interaction became a careful dance, balancing treatment, support, and trust. By evening, the dragon had begun to show signs of improvement. Its breathing was steady, its eyes brighter, and its posture less strained. It had not spoken, it had not roared, but it had communicated in ways more profound than words. It had shown acceptance of help, willingness to trust, and even a faint spark of hope that life could continue. The medic rested nearby, watching the creature. Every muscle in their body ached, and every nerve was alert, but it was worth it. The dragon had survived the night, and now it had a chance to recover further. The bond they had formed was not just about care, it was about respect, understanding, and the recognition that life, no matter how old or wounded, was worth saving. Through the long night and into the next day, the dragon and the human remained together. The wasteland around them was harsh, unforgiving, and lonely, but in that space, a connection had formed, a bond that would guide them through the challenges ahead. The dragon had accepted death, yet it had found something unexpected, a companion, a healer, a guardian who refused to turn away. And the medic knew, deep in their heart, that this was only the beginning. The real journey would come as they moved the dragon to a safer place, continued treatment, and worked to restore strength and health. But in this moment, life had returned to the creature, and in the human's presence, the dragon had begun to believe that survival, hope, and trust were possible once more. The morning air was crisp and still as the medic prepared for the most difficult part of the rescue. The dragon had survived the first night, and its breathing had stabilized, but it was still weak. Its wounds were serious, and moving it from the rocky wasteland to a safer medical habitat would be a delicate operation. Every step had to be planned, every movement calculated. One mistake could undo all the progress they had made. The medic had requested reinforcements, not soldiers, but additional medical support, and supplies were on the way. The team arrived cautiously, carrying stretchers, medical kits, and portable monitoring equipment. They had heard the reports, a massive, old, injured predator, critically weak, yet still alive. Most of them were nervous, as anyone would be when facing such a creature. But the medic's calm presence and confident guidance reassured them. They had seen the dragon up close, had earned its trust, and knew how to handle it safely. The dragon remained still as the human team approached. Its eyes flicked toward the new arrivals, wary but not aggressive. The medic stayed close, speaking softly. "These are here to help, just like me," they whispered. "We will move you carefully. You will not be hurt." The dragon tilted its head slightly, almost acknowledging the explanation. The first challenge was getting the dragon to stand, or at least shift onto the transport platform. Its muscles were weak, its energy low, and any sudden movement could trigger pain or panic. The medic guided it gently, placing hands on the strongest areas of its body to support it without causing further injury. The dragon shifted slightly, testing the human's intentions, and then leaned into the guidance. It was a fragile cooperation, but cooperation nonetheless. Once the dragon was positioned on the platform, the team worked together to stabilize it further. Straps were applied carefully to ensure it would not slide or fall during transport, but they were loose enough not to constrict breathing or circulation. Fluids continued to be administered, and a monitor was attached to track vital signs. The dragon remained calm, eyes following the medic's every movement. It had grown to trust this human, the one who had saved it from the brink of death. The journey to the medical habitat was slow and tense. The terrain was uneven, rocky, and unpredictable. The dragon's platform had to be carefully guided over ridges and boulders, each movement deliberate and cautious. At times, the dragon shifted slightly, testing the limits of its restraints, but the medic reassured it with soft words and gentle touches. "Easy," they whispered. "Just a little further. You're doing well." Midway through the journey, a sudden stumble sent a small jolt through the platform. The dragon flinched, its eyes wide with fear, and its tail lashed slightly. The medic's hands steadied it immediately, speaking softly and placing their palm gently on its side. "I'm here," the medic said. "You're safe. You are not alone. We will not let anything happen to you." Slowly, the dragon's breathing calmed, and it relaxed once more. Upon arrival at the habitat, the real work began. The dragon was lifted carefully from the transport platform onto a secure examination area. Its body was still fragile, and every movement was critical. The medic directed the team, explaining how to handle the creature safely while continuing treatment. "Move slowly," the medic instructed. "Talk to it. It needs reassurance as much as care." The dragon's eyes followed every movement, ears flicking as it listened to the soft voices Dot once settled. The medic and the team began a more thorough examination. The old wounds were cleaned again, new bandages applied, and the infected areas treated with stronger antiseptics. Fluids were continued, and nutritional supplements were prepared to provide energy and strengthen its body. Each action was careful, deliberate, and precise. The dragon, though weary, allowed it all. It had accepted help, and it remained still, trusting the human presence. Throughout the next few days, the medic stayed close, monitoring every sign of improvement or distress. The dragon's vital signs fluctuated, sometimes weak, sometimes steady, and the medic adjusted treatment accordingly. Patience was essential. Pushing too hard could cause setbacks. Moving too slowly risked infection or deterioration. The balance was delicate, requiring constant observation and calm decision-making. During this time, the bond between the dragon and the medic deepened further. The dragon, once a solitary predator, began to respond to the human's presence in subtle ways. It shifted to allow easier access to wounds, followed the medic's movements with its eyes, and occasionally made soft, low sounds, almost like acknowledgement. It was not playful nor fully relaxed, but it had begun to understand that the human's intentions were genuine. The medic spoke gently throughout. "You've been through so much," they said one morning. "You've survived battles, hunger, pain, and the harsh world out there. And now you're going to survive this too. I will help you. You do not have to do it alone." The dragon blinked slowly, and for a moment its gaze softened. There was no language between them, only understanding, but it was profound that the challenges were not only physical. The dragon had spent most of its life as a solitary predator, accustomed to controlling its environment. Being confined, even for safety, was frustrating and painful. The medic recognized this and worked to minimize stress. Movements were slow, instructions clear, and the dragon was allowed to shift as needed within safe limits. It was a lesson in patience, respect, and empathy. One evening, a minor complication arose. A bandage had shifted, exposing a small area of the wound that had begun to swell. The dragon tensed, preparing to defend itself. The medic approached slowly, speaking softly. "I know it hurts. I will fix this carefully. I am not going to hurt you." The dragon watched, muscles still tense, but it allowed the medic to adjust the bandage carefully, cleaning the area and applying fresh antiseptic. Afterward, it shifted slightly closer, a silent acknowledgement of trust. These small victories mattered. Each day, the dragon grew a little stronger, its breathing steadier, its body more relaxed under human care. It began to eat small portions of specially prepared food, allowing itself to regain energy. Fluids and nutrients were administered consistently, and the medic monitored every sign of improvement. The journey had been long, exhausting, and filled with moments of fear and uncertainty. But the dragon, once mortally wounded and resigned to death, was alive. It had survived not only because of medical skill, but because of patience, compassion, and the human choice to care when others might have turned away. By the end of the week, the dragon could lift its head more easily, shift its body with less effort, and respond to the medic's presence with faint acknowledgement rather than tense caution. The bond was evident, subtle but real. It was no longer just a predator facing inevitable death. It was a creature learning to trust, learning that life could continue, and learning that it was not alone. The medic watched quietly one evening, exhausted but satisfied. The dragon lay partially stretched, breathing evenly, its eyes following the human calmly. The harsh wasteland and deadly injuries of the past were still visible in scars and muscle tension, but the spark of life was undeniable. The fight for survival was not over, but it had begun in earnest. And in that quiet medical habitat, surrounded by soft lights and the hum of equipment, human and dragon shared a rare, fragile understanding. Trust had been earned through patience, care, and respect. Life, once hanging by a thread, had taken hold again. The medic had not just saved a creature from death, they had nurtured hope, restored faith, and proved that compassion could transcend fear, species, and history. Days turned into weeks as the dragon slowly regained strength under the careful attention of the human medic. Its breathing had become steady, no longer shallow or labored, and the deep wounds along its sides had begun to heal. The broken wing, though still stiff, could now support slight movements, and its muscles, once wasted from inactivity, started to regain tone. Each small improvement was a victory, both for the dragon and for the medic who had refused to give up on it. The dragon had begun to trust the medic fully. It would follow their movements with calm eyes, allowing them to clean wounds, adjust bandages, and administer fluids without flinching. There were moments when it would shift or stretch its powerful limbs, but never in anger or fear only, to test its own strength or make itself comfortable. The human watched these movements closely, offering guidance and reassurance at every step. "That's right," they would murmur. "Careful, easy. You're doing so well." Nutrition played a critical role in the recovery. Specially prepared meals rich in protein and vitamins were given carefully, in small portions to avoid overwhelming the dragon's weakened system. At first, it ate reluctantly, unsure if it could trust the food or the process. But gradually, hunger overcame caution. It began to eat more regularly, gaining energy with each meal. The medic encouraged this, staying nearby to observe and gently guide the dragon as it learned to eat again. Even simple acts, like moving or stretching, became opportunities to build confidence. The dragon would attempt to lift its head higher, to flex its limbs, and to test its wing carefully. The medic was always there, guiding, supporting, and speaking softly. "Good," they would say. "That's it. You're getting stronger. Keep going." Each small success reinforced the dragon's trust and slowly rebuilt its strength. The environment of the medical habitat was designed to be safe yet stimulating. Rocks, small pools, and climbing areas allowed the dragon to move naturally without risking injury. At first, it was hesitant, unsure if it could trust this new space. But the medic encouraged exploration. "You can move freely," they said one morning. "Nothing here will harm you. Take your time." Slowly, the dragon began to stretch further, explore corners of the habitat, and test its mobility. Each movement was cautious but deliberate, evidence of growing confidence. Over time, the dragon's interactions with the medic grew more profound. It was not friendly in a conventional sense, but it showed recognition and a form of gratitude that was visible in its eyes, its posture, and subtle movements. When the medic approached, it would tilt its head slightly, lower its massive body to allow closer contact, or shift to expose an area for treatment. There was a silent communication between them, an understanding that went beyond words. One evening, as the sun set outside the habitat, painting the walls in warm shades of orange and gold, the medic sat quietly near the dragon. Its eyes followed them calmly, and it lay with its massive body stretched comfortably, no longer tense. The medic reached out and gently placed a hand on its scaled flank. "You've come so far," they whispered. "From the brink of death to here. You've fought so hard. I'm proud of you." The dragon shifted slightly, almost as if acknowledging the words. Though it could not speak, its presence conveyed understanding. It had endured pain, weakness, and fear, yet here it was, alive and slowly regaining power. The medic marveled at its resilience and the quiet intelligence that shone in its gaze. Recovery was not just physical. It was emotional as well. The dragon had lived most of its life alone, a predator feared and respected by all. Now it had learned something new: trust, patience, and the quiet assurance that someone could care without expecting anything in return. This realization was subtle but transformative. It moved differently, watched the world differently, and began to interact with its surroundings in ways it hadn't in years. Weeks passed, and the dragon's strength grew steadily. Its breathing was easy, its muscles firm, and its once frail wing could now support short, careful stretches. The medic continued treatment, but also allowed space for the dragon to explore and regain autonomy. They knew the creature would eventually return to the wild, but it would be stronger and wiser for having survived, and it would remember the human who had saved it. Finally, the day came when the medic knew the dragon was ready to return to its natural habitat. It was not fully healed; some scars and stiffness would remain, but it was strong enough to survive and thrive once more. Preparing for the release was delicate. The medic approached slowly, speaking softly. "You've done it," they said. "You're ready. Go back to the world you know. You are stronger now, and you will survive. And remember, you are not alone." The dragon's eyes followed the medic intently. It moved cautiously at first, testing its legs, stretching its wings, and sniffing the air. Then, with a graceful motion that belied its size, it lifted its massive head and began to walk toward the habitat exit. The medic stayed nearby, watching every step, offering soft encouragement. "That's it," they whispered. "Take your time. You can do it." When the dragon finally stepped outside, the world seemed vast and new. The rocks, the wind, the distant mountains, all of it stretched before it like a place both familiar and strange. It paused, looking back at the medic one last time. There was a quiet acknowledgement in its gaze, a moment of connection that needed no words. The human had saved it, guided it, and nurtured it back to life. And in return, the dragon seemed to convey thanks in the only way it could: presence, awareness, and trust. Then, with slow, powerful movements, it turned and began to disappear into the wild terrain. Its tail swung rhythmically, its wings flexed carefully, and its muscles moved with growing confidence. The medic watched, heart pounding, as the creature they had saved stepped further into freedom. It was not gone completely. The bond they had formed would remain, subtle but unbroken. Even across distance and time, weeks passed after the dragon's release, but it returned occasionally to the outskirts of the habitat, watching quietly from a distance. The medic would see it sometimes in the distance, its massive form silhouetted against the horizon. There were no signs of aggression or fear, only calm awareness, a silent acknowledgement of the life that had been given back. The dragon had returned to its world, Yet it had not forgotten the human who had saved it. The medic often thought about the journey. It had begun with a creature resigned to death, old and broken, and had ended with strength restored and trust rebuilt. The process had required patience, courage, and compassion. It had tested human skill, empathy, and resilience. And it had proven that life, even when fragile and seemingly lost, could endure when someone chose to care. This experience stayed with the medic forever. It was a reminder that even the most unlikely bonds between predator and human, between life on the brink and life restored, could exist. That courage, patience, and kindness could transcend fear, species, and circumstance, and that every life, no matter how broken or feared, deserved a chance. The dragon, now fully recovered, roamed the wilds with renewed strength. Its movements were powerful, confident, and graceful. It hunted and defended its territory, yes, but it did so with a quiet awareness that life had been given to it once more. And though it was independent and free, it always remembered the human who had refused to turn away, who had chosen care over fear, compassion over indifference, and life over death. The story of the old, mortally wounded dragon predator and the human medics spread quietly through the nearby colonies. It became a symbol, not just of survival, but of what could be achieved when courage, empathy, and understanding guided action. It reminded people that even in the harshest, most dangerous circumstances, compassion could make a difference. And for the medic, there was no greater reward than knowing that a creature once resigned to death had been given a second chance. That trust had been earned, that life had been preserved, and that a bond had been formed across the vast differences between species. The dragon was free, strong, and alive, and in its freedom, it carried the proof of what patience, courage, and kindness could accomplish.